Hello, my name is Mary Beth McAteer Margolis, and I'm the Community Outreach Director at MMTV. And today we are hosting Beacon Hill Update with Senator Jason Lewis. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you, Mary Beth. It's great to be back with you.
Thank you. You too. We're being recorded here at MMTV in the Senator's District. Senator Lewis, since 2014, has represented the 5th Middlesex District, which includes Melrose, Malden, Wakefield, Stoneham, Reading, and parts of Winchester.
You got it.
Got it? Good. Okay. Yes. And because we're doing this in sort of a little more global fashion or regional fashion, shall we say, we will be sharing this with other access stations throughout the Senator's District. So we're not going to be just talking about Melrose things today. We're going to be talking about lots of different things in the legislature that has been happening, that the Senator has been proposing and working on during this session. He has served since 2017. I'm sorry, 2014, right? Sorry.
Hard to believe it's been that long already.
10 years. Congratulations. Yes. As the Senator for the 5th Middlesex District. And he is currently the chair of the Joint Committee on Education. And the chair of the State Ethics Committee as well. So he's a very busy person, and we're grateful that he's here with us today. He's really been a big champion for educational issues in our district, and as such has helped pass the Student Opportunity Act, which was a landmark legislation a few years back, really advocating and providing for equal access to excellent education for all the students in our state. And he also was instrumental in getting the state minimum wage raised to $15 an hour, and the new universal family leave and health plan. So welcome again.
And actually, the person I worked with on the getting universal paid family and medical leave passed in Massachusetts when it was a former mayor and state representative, Paul Broder.
Oh, right, exactly.
Because we were co-chairs of the Labor Committee at that time back in 2018, and so we teamed up on that effort to get that done.
So that was one of our little local claims to fame there too. So,
yes.
Well, congratulations on being reelected. This is now your 5th term, maybe?
I think so. Right. So
yeah.
2014, and each term is in the state legislature is 2 years.
Okay.
So I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to continue to serve our district.
And it's been a pretty exciting past few weeks in terms of the election scene. So you're feeling okay about that here in our little
Well, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say I was very disappointed in the results of the election. Obviously, I was a strong supporter of Kamala Harris, and thought she would have made a terrific president. That's not what happened. Obviously, she was had strong support in Massachusetts, and I was glad to see that. But that was not the case in some other parts of the country. So, we are. I'll be honest. We're quite concerned. About what this new administration is going to mean for the country and for Massachusetts. We have very strong protections in our state for civil rights and for our health care and our educational system, but that doesn't shield us entirely from what the federal government may do. And of course, we're very reliant on federal dollars. I think about roughly a third of the state budget, maybe a bit less, is federal money. So they are still a major source of funding that we rely on. So what I do know for sure is that under Governor Healey's leadership and Attorney General Andrea Campbell and the state legislature, we're going to be absolutely committed to doing everything we can to advance our values in Massachusetts and protect our residents, in terms of our health care, our access to quality education, civil rights. So we will fight the good fight, and we will do what we need to do.
continue to move on as best we can.
That's what we're going to do.
Right.
And I know that's what's going to happen at the local level as well.
Absolutely,
you know,
right.
in our local towns and cities, I know folks are very committed as well to. So at the local level, the state level, we'll certainly continue to try to move forward.
Some of those areas that you just mentioned were included in the 5 ballot questions in our state election, for our state election this November. And I know you held a couple of meetings, town hall meetings with constituents to kind of give them some background on it. How'd they turn out, and how are you proceeding with what the decision of the voters is?
Right, so that was the other thing on the Massachusetts ballot. In addition to voting for president and for the United States Senate and everything else, we had 5 very significant ballot initiatives, and 3 of those, the question 1, question 2, question 3, were approved by the voters. They got a majority. Question 4 and 5 did not, so those are not going to move forward.
Okay.
When a ballot question gets a majority of the voters to support it, it becomes law.
Right.
So it doesn't require the legislature or the governor to do anything more. It now is the law. Shortly will be effective, the law in Massachusetts. And so it's really just the same thing as if the state legislature had passed a bill and the governor signed it. It has exactly the same force of effect. So question 1, which was giving the state auditor the power to audit the state legislature, you know, that's going to continue moving forward. My guess is is probably going to end up in the courts, because it's really a question of separation of powers between the executive branch and the legislative branch. So there's a disagreement on that, and so my guess is that'll get resolved in the courts. But I do think that the legislature needs to hear the message from the voters in terms of being more accessible and trying to be more transparent in the work that we do, and I do think that's very important. And so I'll certainly continue to try to do what I can to push in my office and my colleagues to try to be as transparent as we can, because that's very important.
The legislature already does its own audit, I believe.
We do, yes.
With an outside firm or
that's
whatever.
That's right. We do a financial audit every year in an outside audit firm. So we do that, and that audit is made public.
Right.
So question 2 is a very interesting one that I'm going to be very involved in. That relates to the high school graduation requirement.
Right.
So the
MCAS.
voters, the current system was that you had to get above a certain score on the MCAS test. The voters really overwhelmingly said that they don't like that system, and I actually had endorsed ballot question 2, but at the time I endorsed it to move away from the MCAS for graduation requirement, I did make a commitment to developing new legislation to provide an alternative graduation requirement that's uniform statewide.
Okay.
Because I do worry, I don't think we want to have a different graduation requirement in Melrose versus Stoneham versus Brockton versus Springfield. I do think it should be consistent. So I am following through on that, and I'm currently working on drafting legislation that I will be sharing with all the different stakeholder groups.
I think I remember from my days on the school committee, it was U.S. history and gym for 4 years.
That's all that's currently required
under state law. Under state law, right.
And that's an anachronism. It's left over from years and years
the
ago.
50s or something.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So one of the ideas that we're going to explore, which is what a lot of other states do, is to require that all students to graduate high school, have to take a certain number of years of math, certain number of years of English, certain number of years of social studies, foreign language, arts. Yeah. So I do think that's very likely. But there's a lot of details we have to work out. So I'll be filing that legislation in January, which is when the new legislative session starts. Right. And then I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion with teachers, parents, superintendents, school committee members, business leaders, and I'm hopeful we can reach a consensus on that some point next year. So that we can, we will be moving away from the MCAS for graduation requirement, but that we can replace it with an alternative system. By the way, MCAS will not be going away. The students will still be taking it, and we'll still be able to get the results and use that data, but just not, it won't determine whether a student graduates high school or not.
Right.
So
And
that's
then the final one that passed.
yeah. So question 3.
Uber and Lyft drivers.
Yeah,
Right.
and actually, I was very pleased this one passed. It's actually very similar to a bill that I have been championing in the legislature for a number of years. So we weren't able to get it all the way through. So some advocates, 2 unions in particular, pushed that issue and took it to the ballot, and it passed. It wasn't overwhelming, but it did. I think it was 53% of the vote. So that will be moving forward as well, and now it'll be up to rideshare drivers. There's about 70,000 in Massachusetts who drive for Uber and Lyft, some full-time, some part-time, and they will now be able to go through a process to decide if they want to form a union and who they want to represent them, you know, SEIU or some other union, and then they'll be able to bargain with the rideshare companies in a process called sectoral bargaining, which is kind of a new way of organizing, and I think it's very exciting and could be a new model for other types of gig economy workers. I was
just going to say the other gig workers.
Other gig workers.
Right.
So not just rideshare drivers, but well, rideshare drivers in other states potentially, and also other types of gig economy workers. It's a way for them to have more of a voice in how much they get paid, what their benefits are, working conditions, because right now they have no say at all, and they're completely at the mercy of these rideshare companies who really, unfortunately, are many ways taking advantage of them.
Yeah. So the legislative session is coming to a close, the 2-year session that the legislature follows the end of this year.
Right.
And you have worked diligently on many issues, and one of them that is pending is the climate change issue and legislation about that. And we have seen so many floods in our area by the seacoast. We've had that pink house up in Plum Island they're afraid it's going to wash away. Are they going to save it? Are they not going to save it? And now, of course, we're in the middle of a huge drought. So what is this legislation about, and how do you help? How do you think it's going to help us address these issues?
Yeah, so you know, I'm really so proud of our communities and our state that we are really national, if not global, leaders in trying to combat climate change, and we're not shying away, you know, from these challenges. We know these are massive challenges, but we're trying to face them head on, and we're very committed to, you know, phasing out the use of fossil fuels and switching over to clean renewable energy, solar, and especially offshore wind, because we have an amazing opportunity in Massachusetts to develop offshore wind. I've heard some of our regions off the coast of Massachusetts described as the Saudi Arabia of wind. Okay. Because they're just perfect, just like the ocean conditions, the wind are really great. So we are full steam ahead with that. We have passed several pieces of legislation over the last decade to position our state for that. And by the way, it's creating lots of economic opportunity, lots of jobs, lots of new innovation in climate technology. We're making us a hub. So this latest bill that in fact is on Governor Healey's desk right now, she's got the final bill from the House and Senate, which we passed, gave final passage to last week. This bill is mainly focused on trying to update our permitting and our siting laws and rules that sometimes can stand in the way of getting these projects done. So, you know, you're building new infrastructure. It could be solar farms. It could be new battery storage facilities. It could be offshore wind facilities. And so it can be very difficult sometimes to go through the extensive permitting process, and there's other challenges. We're trying to streamline those. We still want to make sure there's a process and that we protect, you know, the interests of communities, the environmental interests, and so on. But we want to make it smoother and more streamlined so that these projects can move forward, you know, more quickly. So that's mostly what this legislation is focused on. So if there were
a particular requirement by a community, let's say, that you needed X amount of acreage to do a solar farm.
Yes.
But and then that varied from what the state is. You're talking about maybe kind of consolidating those.
That's the idea.
Making one overall.
Trying to make that process for the developer of that project just much more straightforward. they don't have to get 8 different permits or approvals, or so again, not that they wouldn't have to still make sure that their project meets the appropriate requirements, but to make that process much simpler and faster.
And you had hearings on that from environmental people who were supporting it. And
in fact, we've had strong support from environmental groups in particular, and other groups that are focused on trying to climate and trying to move us forward. And again, we have the chance to be continue to be a leader. And the new administration coming in Washington, unfortunately, looks like they're going to be still pushing fossil fuels. But we're not moving backwards. We're committed to the future. And we're going to push ahead with these, especially with offshore wind development.
Well, it also ties in with the new economic development bill that is
Indeed.
on the governor's desk, I guess, and which provides a significant investment in the state's economic development and economy. Some of the highlights, obviously, would be this kind of a bill that's also going hand in hand with it. What else is there?
Yeah, they do go hand in hand. You're right. We just also finished, also last week actually, gave final passage to, it's a little over a $4 billion economic development package. We've been working on this also for most of the session. It was a priority for the governor and also for the legislature. And so the bill does a number of things. It does continue our state's investment in life sciences and biotech.
Okay.
Actually, under former Governor Deval Patrick, what was that, more than a decade ago, we made a big a bet on the life sciences industry, and that's been hugely successful. Really Massachusetts is a real hub for life sciences, biotech, and so we want to make sure we continue our leadership, because a lot of other states are trying to compete with us and woo companies away, in those spaces, and we want to continue to maintain innovation leadership. So the bill will continue that commitment to life sciences through different grants, tax credits, the other programs we have. And now we're making a new bet, which I think is very exciting, on climate technology. So it's shorthand for that is climate tech. And so part of that is offshore wind and everything that goes with developing offshore wind and solar. But also, for example, I just visited a company that is now headquartered in Malden, which is part of my district, that is developing a brand new battery storage technology. It's really interesting. It's non-lithium based, so there's no risk of it's not flammable, it's non-toxic. It's an amazing patented new technology, and they are looking to commercialize that, and that could revolutionize, storage. So that's like a good example of the kind of new technology in the clean energy space. So we see Massachusetts as a place where we can, foster that kind of innovation.
And these are some of the areas that you've been sort of championing all along.
Absolutely. These are areas that make so much sense. So those are two big focuses of that economic development bill. But then there's also a lot in there, to support small businesses, to support municipalities through the Mass Works grant program, which is very important to communities.
Entrepreneurial projects like the one in Malden.
Projects or infrastructure projects that cities and towns are trying to do, that state provides grants to assist them. So there's things like that included as well.
Great. Let's talk a minute about healthcare. Again, we really have tried to be a leader in Massachusetts in public health and healthcare services. I was very happy to see that Governor Healy has just recently signed a maternal health care bill that includes not only medical but mental health help for for new mothers.
Yes.
And also, I think yesterday signed a bill for breast cancer screening.
That's right.
To provide more accessibility for women who may be not as able to, afford insurance. What other things are you seeing in terms of the healthcare that
healthcare is always top of mind for me as a legislator, and I think for really all my colleagues, because we recognize how critical it is, and there's always more we need to do to make sure that everyone's getting access to the quality healthcare that they need, that is affordable. So the maternal health bill that we passed and the governor signed Was excited about that because for now we'll be able to license midwives,
And
for example,
doulas
and
and
doulas.
yeah,
So
right,
that
yeah.
was an area that we had, I think will be very helpful for new moms. And also birth centers will be more support for those, so that gives folks, mothers, families, more options.
And really
So
probably
that's great.
saves money
And
because
absolutely.
Instead of having to go to the hospital and be admitted and have
Yes.
all of that process. a
Yeah,
little bit
absolutely.
more-
It's a personal preference
Right.
what you want, but it's a great option to have, and it's much less costly. And the breast cancer bill is a way to make sure that any necessary screenings or tests that a woman may need are going to be covered by insurance.
Right.
Because they can get very expensive. So that's what that bill does. We have another bill that the Senate and the House have both passed, but is still in a conference committee, which means that they're trying to reconcile the differences. So I'm very hopeful this will still get across the finish line before the end of the year. And that is very important too. It deals with substance use disorder.
Oh, okay.
We continue to unfortunately face, a crisis with, addiction and overdoses, and unfortunately some
So
many
will
deaths.
it provide more services for people who have substance abuse issues, or is it?
It's building on what we've been doing, because
Okay.
we already have put a lot more money into addiction. We've also done a lot to support mental health. Actually, we're building a new behavioral health hospital
In
just
Malden,
down the road
right?
in Malden.
Where the Malden
That's right.
Hospital was. Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
very exciting. That's going to open next year.
Okay,
So
great.
there's a lot that's going on.
Yep.
But what this bill does is it would do more to support recovery, for example, licensing of recovery coaches and recovery centers, which are very effective ways to support people who are in recovery. So there's a variety of other strategies like that that we think would, again, be helpful.
Good. Well, you mentioned that you're hoping that that gets done before
Yes.
the end of the year and makes it over the line. Back in 2 years ago, I think, you were very instrumental in helping get the Fair Share Act passed, which was referred to anecdotally as the millionaire's tax,
Right.
Creating an additional 4% tax on people who made over $1 million a year annual income, right?
Right.
Those funds at the time were designated to be used for education and transportation. So has that been happening, and where is the money being gone? Where's it going to? Where's
Well,
it been spent?
I'm glad to report.
As our friend Bob would say.
Yeah, where's the money going, right?
Right.
I'm glad to report that indeed
Yep.
the funds have started to come in from that surtax that the voters approved 2 years ago, and I was proud to be the lead sponsor
You
in
were
the
the lead
Senate
on
of
that,
that
yep.
effort, and those funds have absolutely been dedicated only to investments in education and transportation. The great news is the funds have actually has exceeded what we were expecting to come in.
Well, that
so
is great
that's
news.
great news that it's been, and let me give you some examples of what the legislature has been able to use the funding for, because I think this is such a great story, a success story,
Okay.
and I really appreciate the fact that the voters, supported this. So how do you like universal free school meals for all of our
Fabulous.
students?
Great idea.
All students in Massachusetts in K-12
Yep.
now don't have to worry about where their meals are coming from. They don't have to fill out forms. Parents don't have to, pay
And it
for
was
it or
well
pack a
timed
lunch.
because it was just like
Right
at
after
the
the
end
pandemic.
of the pandemic. Right.
Right. So during the
yep.
pandemic, that happened.
Yes.
Thanks to Congress, they
Right.
they provided the funding. But that was in almost every other state that went away.
Right.
Massachusetts, a few other states, we've made that permanent. That's why we were able to do that. We also just announced, very exciting, that we now have free access to community college in Massachusetts.
Really?
Yep, starting this
Oh,
fall.
great.
Any student who
Okay.
wants to go on to community college, they fill out a financial aid, whatever money that they aren't, that they don't get in federal financial aid, like a Pell Grant,
Right.
the state will cover the remaining cost.
Wonderful.
Tuition fees, and there's a stipend also to help cover your
Great.
books and materials. And we're also increasing financial aid a lot for four-year colleges.
Okay.
So UMass, the other state colleges. So we want to make sure their goal here is that all students who want to go on to higher ed, that they can do so, and they're not going to have to worry about, not being able to afford it, and also that they don't have to graduate with, an unreasonable debt burden.
Is there any?
That's how we're paying for that, is that fair
that
share,
fair share.
that fair share money.
Any of those funds used for like more regional trade schools, or like I know our the Voc, for instance.
Yep, that's right.
Has a tremendous number of students that apply that aren't, that don't get in because it's so limited. So
we are definitely trying to also expand access to technical vocational education seats.
Schools,
yes, because we're seeing a lot of demand.
Great.
And by the way, the new Northeast Vocational School, which serves this whole region.
Yes.
I was just up there a month ago.
Okay.
And they're making tremendous progress on the building a brand new school.
Okay.
Which will open, I think, maybe not next year, but the year after, but that's going to be much larger. So they will be able to accommodate more students
right.
For this area. So that is another benefit. And I just want to give one more example of ways we're using the fair share. Transportation.
Okay.
I think people have noticed that finally the T is doing better.
Yes, I was going to ask, is some of this going to the MBTA?
It is indeed.
Hooray.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
finally, take the Orange Line, which serves our district.
Yep.
No more slow zones. Those have all been removed. The tracks have been upgraded. And people hopefully are seeing a real difference in their commute. So some of this money, along with other resources, has enabled us to really make a dent in the backlog.
And I'm
for
sure some of
improving
the
T.
funds have also, we've seen them on in the bike lanes and the pedestrian and bike safety.
Other transportation improvements, that's right.
Improvements,
That's right. Every year the state legislature gives, it's called Chapter 90 money to cities and towns for transportation, for roads, sidewalks. Because of the fair share, we've been able to increase the Chapter 90 amount by 50%.
Wow, that's great.
So 50% more.
So we should be fixing all our roads.
Unfortunately, there's always more that needs to get done, right? There's
So we have a lot of things to do.
The message is it's working.
It's working.
It's a great example of when we said this is going to be resources, we're going to invest wisely, it's going to make a difference, and that is.
Great,
So,
great.
yeah.
And we have a new year starting, new initiatives. Top three, because we're running out of time. What are your top three initiatives and priorities?
Then I'll get sworn in on January 1st at the new session, so I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. And I would say this topic we talked about, which is now that ballot question 2 passed, we do need to put in place, I think, a new uniform standard for students to graduate high school in Massachusetts.
So as chair of education,
exactly.
you'll be bringing
I'll be
that
working
to your
on
committee.
that. So we're going to bring that forward. That'll be a priority.
Number one.
That's top.
Yeah.
I'd say the other one, housing.
Housing.
We've got to, we passed a major bill this session called the Affordable Homes Act.
Right.
But there's more we have to do because housing is just increasingly unaffordable for young people, for middle income folks. So we've got to keep at it to make housing, both home ownership and rents, accessible to folks. So I'd say that's my other top priority.
All right.
Continue to be a top priority.
Okay. Well, you have your work cut out for you, Senator, and we're grateful that you're representing the 5th Middlesex District and that you're here with us today. This is Mary Beth McAteer Margolis for MMTV, and we have just wrapped up the latest episode of the Beacon Hill Update with Senator Jason Lewis. Thank you again.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Great to talk with you today.